Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode. Today we're going to be talking about fertilizers. But as always, before I start, I would like to say a big thank you to everybody who has supported, sent feedback, followed, shared, liked, sent pictures, called with questions. I really, really do appreciate you. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about fertilizers. But let's first of all start with what fertilizer is. Fertilizer is any natural or synthetic substance added to soils or plants to provide essential nutrients that promote healthy growth, strong roots, and better food production. Simply put, fertilizer is like food for your green babies. There are two types of fertilizers. Fertilizers are organic or chemicals. So the organic fertilizers are usually derived from natural ingredients or nature, while the chemical ones are gotten from a lab. With every fertilizer, there are two main ingredients, which is one, the macronutrients, which are needed in large amounts, and the micronutrients, which are needed in smaller amounts. Now, every time you buy a fertilizer, you will see the three different numbers on it, and those represent the macronutrients, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now, with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, you also see those numbers, and those numbers represent the percentage of that content of that nutrient within the fertilizer. For example, if you see a 312, that means there's 3% of nitrogen, 1% of phosphorus, and 2% of potassium. So those are the basics you see whenever you see fertilizers. Then the secondary micronutrients are calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Most times you may see those listed at the back of when you show the ingredients, so you can actually want to check that as well. Now, see fertilizers as food for your plants, having the basic needs. You know how you have a baby and during the first 6 months of the child, it's just formula, and then after the next 6 months they move into semi-solids, then they move into solids. That's also, think of fertilizer as plant food and think of it that way as well. So when you're picking a fertilizer for a seedling phase, pick something that has a higher nitrogen ratio. And that means the first number that is showed will be slightly higher than the other two. During the vegetative growth, they need nitrogen, calcium, and magnesium. So same thing, nitrogen heavy, calcium, and magnesium. During the flowering stage, they need phosphorus, potassium, and calcium. And during the flowering, fruiting, and ripening phase, they need potassium, magnesium, and calcium. Now, some people might ask, why do we need all these things? So for nitrogen encourages stronger leaf growth and overall plant vigor. Phosphorus supports root development, flowering, and fruit formation. Potassium improves disease resistance, enhancing fruit quality and supports the overall plant health. Calcium presents think of calcium like milk, like good for the bones. So calcium, it strengthens the cell walls, like that's the cells, like the bones. Imagine that as plants as a human being. And then it also prevents blossom end rots with tomatoes. The magnesium is a key component for chlorophyll, which helps photosynthesis and just prevents your leaves from yellowing. And then sulfur helps enzymes function and aids in protein production. I'll just do a little bit of a show and tell to show you the different types of fertilizers, an example of what they look like, and then just explaining what I've just mentioned, but showing you the fertilizers as well. And I'll also be showing you household alternatives that can be used to get the nutrients you're looking for. Okay, so we'll start with the store-bought one. So I'll start with, this is more or less my loot. You can find fertilizer, sometimes they come in spikes. And this kind of fertilizer, you just stick it into the soil. This is better used for when you move outdoors, and you can see it has a high MP, which means that it's good for flowering. And so when you, depending on how you want to use it, you can actually just buy this, put it into your soil when you move your transplant your plants. Next, you have plants in liquid form, and most of the liquid plants are usually the organic type. So we have the organic plant fertilizer, and we have fish emulsion. These are typically high in nitrogen and are best used for seedlings. So we'll discuss that a little bit later. Now, the chemical fertilizers come in powdered form, and you dilute in water. And chemical fertilizers typically have a higher percentage of the overall quantity. As I said, each of these represents a percentage in here. So for this one, you can see you have 20, 14, 14, 30, 55, like almost 60% of the content here is fertilizer. But unlike this one, which is a 511, it's just 70%. So these tend to be a lot stronger and last a long, but I said they're made in the lab. So you can actually choose your. This is also a liquid fertilizer, but same thing. If with liquid, you can see that the ratios are not as much. This is a 458, not necessarily as powerful as much as the powdered ones. Then you still also have another one. This is also water soluble, almost the same thing, but this one you can see has a higher nitrogen ratio than this. So it all goes with different types of when to use it. The fertilizer with the higher ratio is best to use when seedlings or when your plant is beginning to grow. The ones with the higher K ratio, those are more tailored towards the end of the plant's life, when it starts fruiting, flowering, and all. Now, you will also find some that will come in granules, in granular form. This is what the granules look like. And these ones you just pour on the soil, and then they will go with the low and slow. It's just a slow release. So you can just sprinkle, and then it takes about 4 months for it to just generally slowly seep the nutrients into the soil. So at the seedling stage, you need to use a liquid fertilizer. So you either choose from liquid, organic, or liquid chemical. So that's the two you need to do. And I also mentioned that when you buy your fertilizer, you should also look at the back, because some of them tell you when to use it. Like this has a high potassium ratio, and I mentioned the potassium is important when your plants start to flower and fruit. So even here, they'll tell you when to use it is when the flowers begin to form. So whenever you're buying fertilizers, even looking at the NPK ratio as well, read the instructions at the back. It will also tell you when to use what you need to use. So this is, okay, let me mention magnesium. Magnesium is also one of the micronutrients, and you can get magnesium from Epsom salts, like what's used for your bath soaks. So I just use this, and the instructions are in there. But for the Epsom salt, you dilute 1 teaspoon of Epsom salt in a liter of water. And then I just water them to give it a little bit of a top up. Because some of the organic fertilizers that may be used may not have enough of the magnesium or the calcium. Now, for indoor sources, eggs is a very, very good source of calcium. So, if during your seedling phase, just save your eggs. I save my eggs. If I'm like, I crack my egg, I save the back of my eggs to use, because I tend to put it into the soil when I'm planting. But if you like boiled eggs, when you boil your eggs, since there's no salt in it, when you boil your eggs, don't throw away the water. Let the water cool down, and you can use that to actually water your plants. Same thing with coffee. Coffee is also a very good fertilizer because it's high in nitrogen. So if you happen to have, if you're a coffee lover, you have a coffee machine, when you finish making your coffee, the remaining granules, just keep them. Store them in a cool, dry place. When you are moving your plants outside, they can and will be used. Then also green tea. I'm not a big tea drinker, but when I get tea, I just empty the tea bag. Green tea, whenever I use the tea bag, just save it. I'm saving mine here. And these will also be used when it is time to go outdoors when we are mixing, when we're getting the soil ready. A good source of phosphorus is banana peels. Now, banana peels is very high in phosphorus. So what you can do is you can start saving your banana peels, put them inside a Ziploc bag and put them in the freezer if you want to, or you can just wait going. And the good thing with the banana peels is that it's a good source of both potassium and phosphorus. So you're bottom line killing two. Now, if you decide you want to fertilize your seedlings, perfect. Some people do, some people don't. I tend to fertilize my seedlings. You can either choose from an organic fertilizer or the inorganic fertilizer. When you're choosing to fertilize your seedlings, it's best for it to be liquid fertilizers because they are fast active and they can move around, so they actually get to the roots faster. Now, the pros and cons, people say organic versus chemicals, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But for me, one of the pros of using organic over the inorganic is that organic fertilizers tend not to burn your plants. When applying fertilizers, you apply the fertilizers is meant to go to the roots. If your fertilizer touches or comes in very close contact to your stems, there's a high possibility that they may burn. So organic tend not to burn it. Chemicals tend to burn it a little bit more. Secondly, if you're using fertilizers for your seedlings, use it at half strength, not full strength. Because they're babies, you don't give babies too much to eat. Half strength, not full strength. Now, with organic fertilizers, with your diluted strength, you water your plants. I'll give your plants fertilizer every other day. If you use the chemical or the inorganic one, you fertilize once a week. Remember, I mentioned these are a lot stronger than the organic. So it's just the idea of, well, whatever you choose, just know what you're doing and how you're going to work with it. So now let me give you a demo of how to water. Watering with your organic, you can feed from the top. Watering with your inorganic, you feed from the bottom. People ask, so when do you start fertilizing your plants? And people say when you have between 2 to 4 of your true leaves. That is after the first two leaves that came up with your seeds have manifested or grown. Anytime you get 2 or more of those leaves, 2 or 4 leaves, then you can start to fertilize. If you're use if you're using the organic fertilizer, you have the instructions written at the back of of the the container. Like mine is saying 1 teaspoon for every 4 liters. So I'm just going to use a milk jug container. Since I have lots of plants, I'm sure I'll use the fertilizer and then use half of that. So it's going to be half a teaspoon into the milk jug. Make sure you shake it very well before you start measuring, and also shake it properly and then water. When you're watering your plants, you can water from the top. With organic fertilizer, there's no fear of the plants getting burnt. So that's one of the benefits. That's why I like it. So you can actually just pour the fertilizer, the liquid fertilizer on it. I will reiterate, please, if you're planning to use liquid organic fertilizer, try to get the deodorized version because they smell. And if you're planting indoors, that could be a little bit of a hazard or inconvenience for whatever room you're using to plant. If you decide to use the inorganic fertilizer, it's a different method. So for this one, reading the indoor plants, mix half teaspoon in every 1 gallon of water. That's 4 liters. So here is half teaspoon for this one. So we're going to make it a quarter of a teaspoon. These usually come with
Make sure to mix your fertilizer very well. Then what you would do is to pour some fertilizer into a tray. Remember I said we're actually bottom feeding these. So you put it inside the tray, pour it in, and then you place each of the cups into the tray. The idea is for the fertilizer to seep into the soil from the bottom, not from the top. This way, you're sure that your stems and your leaves will not come in contact with the fertilizer. Once that's done, you leave it in the fertilizer for 30 minutes. The intent is for the soil to absorb the fertilizer, whereby the fertilizer is feeding the roots but not touching the stems or the leaves, which will prevent them from burning.
So this is 30 minutes later, and what you just do is just lift it up and place it back into the second cup.
Then you place back in your sun as normal. You then discard the fertilizer, it's no longer needed. You can't keep them and use it again. So discard it, and then when you want to fertilize again, you mix the batch, follow the same process, and then fertilize your plants with a new mix. Let me reiterate once again. If you are using organic fertilizer, you can water every other day when you're watering your plants. If you are using inorganic fertilizer, fertilize once a week. Some of you might wonder, so Amina, where can I get fertilizer from? You can actually check in any of your grocery stores, Roma, Superstores, Canadian Tire, you actually have it there. But if you prefer doing online shopping, there's links here, and also links in the description on where you can get fertilizer for the seedling phase. I have added the organic as well as the inorganic. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a lovely day.